Boss, hello. Thanks for coming. I'm going to try doing it upstairs again so that I can avoid this ongoing problem with the connection. And the only downside, of course, is that the sun is setting right there. So it means that it's very, very mabushi. It's very dark, almost hard to see. Let me see if pop out chat. Hope everyone's well. I'm still trying to set this up. Good to see everyone. Us, here we go. For some reason. Okay. Torbjörn, Us. I got your message too, Torbjörn, about the Patreon. Thank you, everyone. And if you're not a member of Patreon, catch up. But it's something I'm going to address. And one of the ways I'm looking at it is to try and find an alternate way to go about the Patreon without Patreon. So in other words, use a different system. But thanks for the message. I saw it very late last night. I just haven't had a chance to look at it yet. Harry, Us from down the mountain. Rochelle, Us. Good on you. Thanks, Rochelle, for coming, as always. Sensei Claudia. You're in New York, are you, Claudia? I hope everything's safe there. Paul Knieb, my Freund, aus Deutschland. Wie geht's, my friend? Good to see you again. And Gare, good to see you, Gare. What's my schedule's all over the place? Around this afternoon. Just got a message about training. I'll get onto that in a sec. Gare, good to see you, man. It's always great. I always enjoy training with you too. I really like you, everything about your spirit and everything. Herman, Urs, Daniel, Urs, good to see you, Daniel. Got your message. Thank you. Rob De Souza from Tassie. Great to see you. Urs, Paddy, good to see you. Hey, Paddy, did you see you got a nice rap from Nick Pettis on one of his Facebook, on one of his YouTube things? He mentioned you and he told people to go looking for the Kyokushin Shuffle and his interview. So that's great news for you too. Us, Mike, it's still stormy. Man, it's been raining all week in Western Australia. JR, us. Good to see you, JR. And let me keep going down. I think there's a few more. Us, Sensei Claudios. Alan, Glenn. Us, Glenn, nice to see your face there, man. And Gaza from down the mountain, good on you, man. Thanks for coming. Yes, yeah, he did. Have a look at one of his most recent YouTube videos. He gave you a real good rap. Didn't give me one, so I'm going to have a few words to him next time. I'll make sure we're not standing up in front of each other. I'll make sure I've got him on the ground in the mount or something before I say anything. Frederick, hey, Frederick from Sweden, good to see you. Okay, so thanks for coming, everyone. Today I wanted to talk about the Dojo Kun. I think I may have done it before, but it's really interesting because the things we consider about the Dojo Kun, that sun's gone behind a tree, so that means I could be able to reshape because I'm just sitting on my backside, but I hate doing it on my backside. I like to do it in Seiza. So I'll plug everything in. See it here. And where's my phone with my time on it so I don't lose touch? So look, please, by all means, I'd love to see your input. I don't have a lot of notes today. Made a couple just to remind me of things. But the Dojo Kun, every style has a Dojo Kun, and pretty well every company has a a slogan or logo or a motto or that sort of thing. So it's not unusual to have this sort of guiding principle. But the interesting thing about the martial arts is, even though the martial arts, or particularly karate, is a fighting system that's designed to teach you how to inflict maximal damage in minimal time, every Dojo Kun from every style that I've ever seen is all about the mind and the heart and the spirit. So ultimately, what we're doing has nothing to do with fighting so much, or has little to do with fighting and everything to do with the human consciousnness. And that makes so much sense because, like the last line of the Dojo Kun says, Shogai no shugyo, karate no michi suji, kyokushin no michi o matto suru koto. So Shogai no shugyo, that means Shogai is a lifetime, and shugyo is, the martial arts, the pursuit of training. So Shogai no shugyo means through training your entire lifetime. So it's a lifelong thing. Urs, Marco, thanks for coming. How are you today? And sorry about that time the other week where we got a little lost. So I hope today goes well. So we're going backwards. The last line of the Dojo Kun, Shogai no Shugyo Karate no Michi ni Tsuji, Kyokushin no Michi o Matou suru koto. Kyokushin no Michi, the path of Kyokushin. You know, it's a lot more than the basics and the moving basics and so on. And this is what we're finding now, and this is why, you know, in my karate anyway, we tend to see things as somewhat of a renaissance, somewhat of a new genesis, as Sosai called it. And it's very clear to me, and the more I think about it, it's very obvious that what the new renaissance, or the new renaissance, that's a double superlative, but the new genesis that Sosai spoke about was a spiritual thing. You know, and Sosai was adamant all the time. Everything he used to even say, I don't care how strong a fighter is, if they don't have their head together, it just becomes violence. And he often talked about, and I've written a whole new chapter in my book, The Budo Karate of Mas Oyama, about Ariake Shogo. That's the cartoon character in the Budo, in Karate Baka Ichidai, the cartoon serialization of Sosai's life. And in that, there's a student called Ariake Shogo. Well, the real life student of that was a guy named Haruyama. And Haruyama was he was like that. Sosai said, I don't think anyone realizes how good this guy was. And he said, you look at Matsui, who won 3 tournaments in a row and his was calculated, beautiful, technical karate. And you look at Sanpei, who won 3 tournaments in a row, whose karate was just knock down, drag out. I don't care if you break my ribs, I'm still going to keep coming forward sort of karate. And he said Haruyama was the best of both of them. He was more technical than Matsui and tougher and harder than Sanpei. But even then, Sosai threw him out of the organization when he was about 20 years old because he just had no control. Now, looking back on it now, and with the benefit of I'm just reshaping because I'm right on the edge of these mats because I've gone outdoors. But the benefit of hindsight, we now understand things like PTSD and so on. And I say this kid had some real serious trauma when he was young, because even as a 15 or 16-year-old, he was famous for getting out there and just deliberately bumping into these yakuza, these tough yakuza, and then taking a bunch of them out. You know, and it got to the point where not only did he go beat up yakuza, but go and beat up other karate schools as well. And he thought he was doing the right thing by Sosai, but as it turned out, it wasn't good. So Sosai threw him out. He said to him, you've got to get your act together. You've got to develop your heart and mind, because your physical technique is fine. It's just the rest of it that needs work. And we see evidence of this all the time. Even today, you look at different people in the martial arts, and you know, if their karate is beautiful, that's one thing. But if their attitude is wrong and their head's not together, it's no fun at all. You lose respect for them straight away. And all this is encapsulated in the Dojo Kun. Usti Pankar, namaste. Good to see you, man. And Clarence from South Africa, good to see you. Mike, the body follows the brain. Explains why you get lost quite often. Yeah, look, the body does follow the brain. Now, I've mentioned that previously. Another way that Yogananda, the yoga teacher Yogananda, put it was, the mind is the wielder of muscles. Okay, it is the mind that determines muscles and the energy that we can apply to it. And this is, I remember when Sosai was being interviewed in '92, and they asked him how he would bend a coin. And you know, so many people don't believe some of these things. You know, there was some guy who was just going after me about Sosai fighting bulls, you know, and was it a steer or a bull? Well, clearly Sosai made no attempt to hide that it was anything but a steer. You know, he even described it as already destined for slaughterhouses, or they weighed maybe 1,000 or 1,200 pounds. Well, that's not a bull, that's a steer. And bulls were not bulls, you know, uncastrated male bovines, if you like, bulls. They were never sent to
the slaughterhouse. It was always the steers that did that, and the reason steers were sent was because the meat was. I don't know. I don't eat meat, so I wouldn't know. But the point was, Solsai never really attempted to hide or tell lies. A lot of exaggerations surround his life. There's no doubt about it. But I can tell you now, bending the coins isn't one of them. Bobby Lowe said he saw that many occasions, and a lot of people did. And Raj Kumar, namaste, all the way from Nepal. Good to see you. So the fact of the matter is that in this interview, they asked him, how does someone bend a coin in your fingers? And he said, well, it comes down to the amount of willpower you can apply to your muscles, and the fact of the matter is, in the autobiography of the Yogi, where in chapter 6, where he talks about the Tiger Swami, this guy that he's called the Tiger Swami. Wow, JR, remind me who you are with the JR. My apologies, but that's good news. I mean, you're doing everything there. You read Yogananda's biography and get Kriya Yoga, well, then you're on the way out. But anyway, in that, he talks about the Tiger Swami. He says, mind is the wielder of muscles. The force of a hammer blow is determined by the amount of mental stimulation you put in it. So same nail, same hammer, tap, tap. Yani. Good to see you, man. Thanks. Yeah, that's great news. Same hammer, same nail, tap, 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 tap. You go nowhere, but you apply some willpower to it. Boom. Well, that's 100% mental, because it's the same hammer, same nail. Okay, you can take your fist and you can put it on someone and just push them, or you can hold someone at bay with your hand. We do that all the time when you're trying to create space, when you're wrestling and grappling with someone and they close the gap to create space. You cross face them and you push away, or especially if they start to pull your head down like that to bring the knees up. Okay, well, you're just going to bring your arm across and create space, and it doesn't hurt them, it just breaks their grip. Well, the same palm heel, you hit them right on the jaw in the same place, you knock them out cold. It's one of the best techniques ever. Where's Chrissy? Good to see you. Thanks for coming. Chrissy's my nephew and one of the black belts. So I think, and it's interesting that we're talking about Yogananda and yoga and Kriya Yoga and all that sort of things. It's very true. I hope you're getting the self-realization fellowship stuff, but there's always seems to be a fine line between a super hard training session and a violent session. The line is, yes, wow, that's a very true statement, Gaz. It's all in the attitude. This is why I'm always talking about keep your A game and your A mindset separate. Your A mindset is the right attitude, where you're training and if someone comes in and hits you too hard, and all of a sudden your ego gets in the way. You go, that son of a gun, he's not allowed to hit me, he's only a yellow belt, and you come flying back. Well, then all of a sudden the yellow belt's A mindset goes out the window and his protective A game comes in, and it's completely wrong. Look, I know there's value in that too, because when I was 17, living in Hombu, living in Japan, training, well, every day was a fear factor thing, and I'd go to training with my heart palpitating and get knocked out every now and then. Not all the time, but but what it does is it really is a fast track to a certain type of efficiency, But in terms of developing skills with a long-term view, well, then I'm not too sure that that's the only way. So anyway, the Dojo Kun. The first line, I have my own book, ta-da, with the Dojo Kun in it. The first line starts, so we will train our hearts and bodies for firm, unshaking spirit. This is everything. And it's so interesting because there's a book called the Yoga Sutras, and if you can get a chance to read it, it's one of the greatest books ever written. And that starts off, that's written by a guy named Patanjali. A lot of yoga groups kind of claim it as their own and all this sort of thing, but with perfect humility and frankness, I'd say that most yoga organizations that you see around today have no idea what they're talking about, because yoga is not the hatha exercises where you're doing this sort of thing. Oh, shout out to Kylie. Oh, look at my t-shirt. How cool is that t-shirt? From the Masubi Dojo of Kylie baker in Melbourne. Great shirt. I've shown you before. I love it. I wear it all the time. Okay, so the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali is the key primary source book, one of the source books for yoga. And in that, it starts off, here begins the lessons in yoga, and it starts off with the phrase chitta vritti nirodha, which means the mind stuff, chitta. And vritti is the fluctuations, the waves of consciousness. Chitta is the mind stuff. Chitta vritti means the fluctuating minds and the monkey mind and the mind going all over, up and down and out of control. Nirodha means bringing under control or neutralizing. So the first line of yoga that you learn yoga is chitta vritti nirodha, which means yoga is the cessation of the fluctuations of the mind waves. Okay, so the first line you learn in yoga and the first line you learn in karate, we will train our hearts and bodies for a firm, unshaking spirit. Well, I mean, it doesn't get more clearer than that. It's about that stability of the mind, you know. And if anyone's ever done something stupid or almost gotten caught, you know, when you're young kids, you do things like jump fences and, you know, get up to mischief. If you don't, you haven't really lived. But anyway, how many times do you think, whoa, just got away with that? And I can also motorbikes. Boy, oh boy, I rode a motorbike for many years. And I remember once I'm tearing along, just my mind's like, I was just actually going home from training, nice and easy. And I had it was a powerful motorbike in those days, a K2 750. This is back in 77, 78. And as I'm driving along, I realized there's a train across the road and then the train track right next to the road. And I'm driving, I look at the train, that's all right. And then I realized up ahead I had to turn right. And it was it wasn't overpass, it was like a fumikiri, what are they, a rail crossing. And I thought, oh, okay, I looked back and it went forever. It was this freight train and it must have been more than a kilometer long. So I thought, oh, bugger that. So I gunned it and I took off and I'm racing to get in front of the train. And even as I'm saying this, you look at me shaking your head, right? What an idiot. And then I've come around and I did a really sharp turn and the bike started to slide a little bit in some gravel, and I just got across and the train driver saw what I was doing, so he hits the horn. So there's another little level of stress like this, and I'm coming up, vroom, and I get across, and a couple of seconds later, vroom, the train goes, and I literally pulled the bike over and I turned it off, and I sat there thinking, what was I thinking? You know, and it's moments like that you think, but for the, you know, grace of God, I'd be a dead man right now. Okay, so that is a perfect example of the loss of firm, unshaking spirit, or chitta vritti nirodha, of the mind waves that aren't settled, you know. Now, that first line of the Dojo Kun, gosh, you could spend a whole lifetime studying just that. And, you know, I also know when we talk to people about dealing with problems and hassles and challenges and tough times and hard times, and you know, the reality is it's so often related to I'm hoping this chat is something through. I just got a message. Whenever I get a message when I'm talking on the thing, yeah, it's all right, as long as the messages are coming through. But one of the easiest, and I know it's oversimplification is never good either, but one of the easiest ways to identify someone who's a master really is their ability to maintain equilibrated minds. You know, you think about the people that you know that you deeply respect, and quite often they have a very centered, equilibrated mind. And there's that New Age, I'm not really into New Age, but there's that New Age teacher named John DeMartini, and he's got some really good stuff. He's very well read, presents some pretty amazing stuff. And he was the one I met him on an airplane. Actually, I was talking to him, and he pointed out a couple of things to me which really had a big impact, because I was talking similar to this stuff. We were having a chat whilst he was just grabbing a cup of tea. I made him a cup of tea. We were chatting in the galley of the aircraft. And he was saying that it's all about neutralizing. Well, no, he didn't use that word. He just said removing emotional charges were the words he used. Is the emotions which we normally identify with as being real are actually not real. That when we have an emotional charge, I'm just checking the volume, make sure it's up enough. Yep, I think so. When we have an emotional charge, that is actually taking us away from our real state. That the state of emotional charge is not our true nature. Our true nature is a centered, equilibrated state, and it's so true. And the Yoga Sutra said the same thing. Yoga is, and yoga just means the union of the individualized soul with the Godhead, or whatever you want to call God. So he was saying the same thing. So they all say the same thing. So the first line, we will train our hearts and bodies for a firm, unshaking spirit. Well, there's a lifetime of hard work right there. I'm not seeing any comments, so I hope this is going through. Just give me an okay sign to make sure everything's good. Okay. Now the next line is, what are we? We pursue the true meaning of the martial way, so that in times, all good? Us, thanks. Us, all good, thanks. Dallas, Kyokushin, Us, welcome. All the way from hot Dallas, Texas. Wow, Us, yeah, good, loud and clear. Okay, so the second line, we pursue the true meaning of the martial way, so that in time our senses may be alert. The true meaning of the martial way. Buno Shinzui in Japanese, Bu or Budo martial arts. Buno Shinzui. Shinzui, the word Shinzui, I don't have my iPad today. I could draw the kanji. Shinzui kind of means the quintessence, or the essential nature of things, the quiddity, that the real essential quintessence. So to find the real essential nature of what we're doing here in the Buddha, Buno Shinzo Kiyame, Kini Hashikani Bin Narukoto. Eventually, we want to get to the point where our senses are stable but alert. Okay, so that's very interesting as well. The second line again is talking about the mental stuff. And there isn't a single line in this Dojo Kun, or a single line that I can ever recall Sosai saying, well, maybe not, that's an exaggeration, but for the most part, there has never been a teaching worth its weight that didn't talk about stabilizing the mind, calming the mind. Even that scene in The Last Samurai with Tom Cruise, please forgive too many minds. Mind the enemy, mind the sword, mind the people watching. Too many minds, no mind. Well, that samurai concept of mushin, that no mind, where it's a state of equilibrated, centered calmness. And I won't mention his name because he's a very well-known martial artist, and it's up to him whether he wants to talk about this stuff. But I was talking about this to one guy, and he was saying too that the more he's fought everything. He's fought Kyokushin, grappling, MMA, boxing, kick. He's done it all, and he's gone to the very top against the toughest guys. And he says the more he thinks about it and the more he contemplates training, the more he realizes that it's all about love. It's from this big tough guy. It's all about love, and love is just another thing from yoga. It's love. People, what is love? Well, it's not some emotion. It's got nothing to do with emotions. Love is the attracting force within creation. That's very profound. It's not original to me, but love is the attracting force within creation. When people see love as an emotion, it's one thing, but when you see it as a force, a part of the electromagnetic universe as we know it. It's the attracting force within creation. And that's very interesting, very profound, Mike. Also known as the middle way, hence the need for a balanced outlook. Yes. Well, there you go. That's very interesting. That's true. Love the idea of Kyokushin Genesis. It all started with the name Kyokushin Kaikan, Society for the Search for the Ultimate Truth. People don't understand the real spiritual depths. Oh, look, you know, over the years, I've been very fortunate. I'm just holding my hand up because that sun's getting pretty bright as it drops down. Over the years, I've been pretty fortunate. I've been in the right place at the right time, got lucky, and I'd spent many, many hours, sometimes alone, sometimes overnight, sleeping on the couch in Soul Sai's office. And I had an opportunity to pore over his books. And I can tell you that most of his books were books on philosophy, books on religion, lots of books on yoga, including the Yogananda book. So he was, you know, and then you read his accounts of when he was a young man and his experiences in mountain training and so on. And it's all about the mind. It's all about the spirit. And even the choice of places where he went, you know, Mount Minobu and Mount Kiyosumi, and they're both places with 1,000 plus year old history of spiritual retreat where people would go for spiritual purification. You know, there's no doubt in my mind that karate is a spiritual path more than anything else, because if it was just a path of brutality, if it was just a path of fighting and strength, it wouldn't have lasted, and it wouldn't last, and it wouldn't maintain its central role in the minds of even reasonably intelligent people, you know. Yeah, exactly. Shingi Tai. Well, it's always the mind first, and you know, the first line Yoga Sutras. Yoga is the cessation of the fluctuating mind waves. Another one of my favorite sentences I ever heard. In fact, if I write it down, I just try and see the keyboard. Forgive me. It'll come to me in a sec. Can't believe I've forgotten. It's one of my favorites. It'll come back to me in a rush. Okay, so that second line also, pursue the tree in the master way, so that in time our senses may be alert. Kan ni bin naru koto, kan ni bin naru koto. Okay, that's the third line. Kan ni bin naru koto. Okay, our senses are balanced and alert. That's very, very valuable. Next one. We observe the rules of courtesy, respect our superiors, and refrain from violence. These are the rules of courtesy. Chojo kesh. Respect our superiors is a bit of a tricky one. I've tried to think of different ways to translate that more efficiently, and perhaps there are, but it's hard to get it in a short thing, because chojo kesh literally means to respect those who went before us, or our elders. Okay, so the word that kind of brings a lot of that together is seniors, you know, what's the word we use? Superiors, those who are above us. And it's a very Confucianist term, because in Confucianism and so on, and Taoism, they talk about you have the average man. All right, JR, thanks, man. Good to see you. We have the average man, or the general day-to-day man, and then on top of that, you have what in Taoism and Confucianism they call the superior man, with a capital S and a capital M. And that's just the translation of what could be, I guess, in Buddhism, they might call it a bodhisattva. In Hinduism, they might call it an avatut, or a jivan mukta, you know, and in Christianity, you might call them a saint. You know, they're just different ways to describe it. But they talk about there are certain people who, on the spiritual evolution, are just a step above us, so they deserve respect. And when we respect them, we tune into them. When you tune in, you learn a whole lot. Okay, so that line particularly is, once again, courtesy, respect for seniors, and refraining from violence. That's pretty clear about what that talks about too. I stayed with an Aikido teacher when I was in Japan, and his stories about Sosai made me realize even more how, oh, that's very interesting, Clarence. You have to tell me more about that. I'd be interested to know more about that, who the teacher was and everything. But, you know, since Sosai died, it's always easy to talk about someone when they're not around. Since Sosai died, there's been a lot of talk about different things. I can tell you now there's a lot more speculation and talk about his students more than him. And I think they're the students who tend to miss the point. But that's interesting because I've seen interviews with great Aikido teachers and karate teachers and just general people, and they all, I'm fixing the microphone, and they all say the same thing, that one guy said, one great karate teacher said to me, if the average person can see 3 years ahead, Mas Oyama can see 30 years ahead. What he was doing was so far ahead of his time. And if you look at his rules of tournaments, you know, we weren't the first, Kyokushin wasn't the first organization to run full contact tournaments. I'd say pretty well anyone who's ever done karate seriously would have had a whack, put pads on if they had to, and gloved up and so on. And you've only got there's plenty of photorealistic. I'm not referring to, Ben, good to see you. You should have dropped in. Good to see you, Ben. Harry, this is why some of that return to the teaching of karate later. Yeah, you know, and that's, you know, going back to the start is a very, very powerful but humbling thing. No argument. Someone, you know, sometimes when we go back, we try to slot back in where we were, but I'm this close. Unfortunately, I walk into places just because of Sosai. People tend to recognize my face, so I don't get away with it. But if I was even fractionally anonymous, I'd just put a white belt on and wander into dojos left, right, and center, and just zip my lip and learn stuff. It's the way to go, I think. But anyway, look, all these people, this fellow is saying, if the average person can see 3 years ahead, Sosai can see 30 years ahead. Well, that's very profound. And these Kyokushin tournament rules, which were devised in the 60s, my first tournament was 78, and I can remember even in 1980, we weren't allowed to grab, but we could hook our hands behind the head and kick with knees like that. And I remember in the semi-final of the Australians, I hit a really nice guy, but when you're on the mat, it's just, you're only there for destruction. And so I went crack and I hit him. He was much taller than me, so I had to pull his head down. I wouldn't have been able to do it otherwise. But I pulled his head down and hit him. I remember my knee hitting right between the eyes, and it worked. Okay, but if there's one rule that has changed, some countries change different rules. They try to manipulate the rules because they understand a little better. But the only rule that I see that's no longer present is that hooking the head. Otherwise, the rules are essentially unchanged, and they're really profound. And, you know, that people always minimize it because there's no head punches. But the fact of the matter is, one of the reasons we have so many lawyers and doctors and professionals who are able to continue training in Kyokushin for a lifetime is because we don't have the head punches. You can fight an entire tournament career and you'll get as many whacks in the head as you'll get that a boxer gets in a single training sparring session. Okay, and that is important. We know that now because of head trauma. I was about to say PCR, polymerase chain reaction. That's not what I was talking about. I was talking about the CTD. That's it. Chronic traumatic CTE. Chronic traumatic encephalopathy. That's it, Chris. Thanks. CTE. I've got too many whacks in the head. I can't even remember what my problem with my head is. CTE, not PCR. If you've ever read that book by my favorite scientist of all time, Dancing in the Minefield, what was his name? Carrie. Yeah, I'm forgetting everything today because it's cold. But anyway, so once again, the third line is also a spiritual thing. We will respect our superiors, refrain from violence, and what's the next part? Remember the rules of courtesy. Well, the rules of courtesy are fundamental rules of life. And in Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, there's the eightfold path of yoga, it's called. And the first two steps are the yam niyam, which are the rules of the things you should do and the things you shouldn't. They're like the 10 Commandments. Yogananda said if they change the name of the 10 Commandments to the 10 suggestions for a really happy life, maybe more people would have taken so much more notice. But the fact that they call them the 10 Commandments kind of puts people off. But the fact is, what they are rules that gives you stability in your life. And that's, once again, stability. There's that word. Equilibrating the mind, stilling the mind, overcoming the fluctuations. And I'm trying to think of that really good sentence. I'll write it down. Beware, that's it, beware of the emotional reactions to the inevitable fluctuations of the phenomenal world. I mean, how cool is that sentence? Beware of the emotional reactions to the inevitable fluctuations of the phenomenal world. The phenomenal world is just the non-noumenal world. It's the world of duality. It's the world of the world that we live in, where you have everything has a balance: winter, summer, hot, cold. That's the phenomenal world. So beware of the emotional reactions to the inevitable. That's such a cool thing, you know, inevitable fluctuations. There is no way around it. The nature of the phenomenal world is one of inevitable fluctuations. Okay, and that's never going to change, because that's what makes it a phenomenal world. If you look up the actual meaning of the word phenomenal, it doesn't necessarily mean incredible. It just means a world of duality. Beware of the emotional reaction to the other fluctuations of the phenomenal world. Well, that's the sentence. I think it's a profound sentence. Atrophy. That's what I feel every day when I don't train, Marco. All right. So the next line, the Dojo Kun, is the religious line. You know, we will follow our religious principles. Buno shinbutsu o totobi kenjo no bitoku o asarezaru koto. We will follow religious principles and never forget the true virtue of humility. Humility, there it is again, the stability of mind. And Shinbutsu, we've spoken about this before. The Japanese word Shinbutsu, which literally is often translated as Shin, God, and Butsu, Buddha. But Shinbutsu in this word really means the Shinto deities or the Shinto gods of their animistic faith. So the word Shinbutsu is actually really pretty well exclusive to the Japanese. So to find a better version, it used to be we will follow our gods and Buddha, and I didn't like that, particularly if someone is not necessarily into Buddhism or not necessarily into a word called God. They may have a different approach to the spirit. So I chose to put in my book, I chose religious principles because that way it covers everything. And religion, from the Latin root religare, means that which is important to you, you know. So if something's religious to you, it becomes your religious principle. So for some people, karate becomes their religion because training every day is carved in granite. You never miss it. It's that important to you that it's like a religion. And so what matters, what happens to you, or what do you do with what happens to you? You lost me. It must have been in relation to the beware of the emotional reaction to the inevitable fluctuation. Well, what it's saying is, if that's what you're referring to, Mike, beware of the emotional reactions to the inevitable fluctuations of the phenomenal world. It's simply saying that whatever happens, happens. It's not malevolent or benevolent. It just is. And what determines whether it becomes malevolent, benevolent is our emotional reaction to it, right? So when we're in the dojo sparring away and someone whacks us, it's like the Peter Collis syndrome. Peter Collis is, for those non-Aussies who don't know Peter Collis, he was one of Australia's great Kyokushin fighters, many years in the final, 5 times Australian champion, best 16 in the third world tournament. So he's a great fighter. and he trains in our dojo still. We went to the same high school together, started karate at the same dojo. And Pete can be sparring a yellow belt or anyone, and he'll go really hard. But if that yellow belt scores on him, he'll go, whoa, good one. You know, he is nothing but encouraging, and he'll go really hard. And Gaz knows what I'm talking about. And anyone within the sphere of the Gold Coast knows what I'm talking about. You'll get an opportunity to work with him, that's for sure. But Gaz McCausland, he's sparred Pete, and he's like that. Nothing ever disturbs his ego. He doesn't get carried away. He'll fight hard and he'll seek challenges and so on. Yeah, 100%, exactly. Ben Tipper too. Every explicit duality is an implicit unity. Oh, that's very high for me, Ben. Never heard that before. Yeah, so it's what we do with it. It's not what happens to us. It's what we become through it, what we do with it. Like they say, you got that line that I'm always talking about, that line of integrity and character, and above, I won't even bother drawing it, above the line, below the line. And if you're above the line, well, then you're safe and sound because you're behaving with responsibility and integrity. If you're below the line, you're making excuses, denying responsibility, blaming everyone else in the world, and looking for a reason to get out of it, you know. And that's where the mind is fluctuating. And if you know people who have problems or who have emotional problems and so on, everyone has emotions. It's the magnitude of the oscillations that makes all the difference. You know, you can experience the same thing with a low magnitude, and you pop out the other end a lot saner, a lot healthier, a lot happier. You know, so Shimbutsu totobi kenjo no bitoku o wazare zaru koto. We will follow religious principles and never forget the true virtue of humility. Well, humility is a quality that is in every single spiritual path, religion, and teaching. You know, and there's in martial arts, there's nothing worse than a braggadocio sort of martial artist. He can be really, really good and absolutely do nothing for you. It's just like, no, I don't care if he can teach me how to do the best roundhouse kick in the world. His attitude is so wrong, and he's so arrogant, and he's so completely out there that I don't even want to be in the same room with him. And there are plenty of guys like that. I've been attracted to someone because I think, wow, I really want this person to teach me. And within 5 seconds of meeting them, you just think, oh, look, I just realized something's come up. I've got to go. I completely don't want to be in their presence, you know. On the other hand, there are people, I have a good friend. I haven't spent a lot of time with him, but the more time I spend with him, the more I enjoy his company. Andrea Stoppa in Italy. And he's one of my modern day heroes. He's a Kyokushin, top level Kyokushin fighter, national judo champion of Italy, national Kyokushin champion of Italy, national kudo champion of Italy. Great guy whose technique is just superlative. BJJ, black belt, the works. And we finally got to train together in January this year when I did a camp in Croatia. And I mean, the guy is, he's everything. He's the whole picture to me. Great technique, courageous, fearless, strong technique, has all the ranges, all the 5 ranges covered, and is such a nice, humble guy, you know. And he's the sort of guy, if you put it on him in Kumite, he would respond appropriately, put it that way. He wouldn't come back and try and beat you up. There are some black belts out there who they can be sparring, and I think sometimes they're not as good as they think they are, and they can be sparring with a colored belt, and that colored belt will put it on them, and they just go nuts. There's nothing they can do. They'll try to go nuts, but it just upsets them, you know. Once I had a guy introducing to me like this, I'm a 7th Dan, I was sure what to do with that, so left it to him. Yeah, I always appreciate occasional whack in the head. Nothing wakes you up faster. Smile. Austin continue. Well, yeah, you know, there's a whack in the head and a whack in the head. There's a whack in the head and a whack in the head, and they send different messages. Us Budi from Indonesia. Good to see you, man. Thanks for coming along, Budi. Budi's just joined Kyokushin and his group. Big, solid group. But, you know, there are, like Mike says, a guy introduced himself as a 7th Dan. I got an email today from Hombu, And the Hombu asked me to translate this email. It was from this guy in Poland, I believe, who's made himself a 10th dan. And he wears the Kyokushin kanji, a Kyokushin belt with 10 stripes on. And in his mind, he now puts himself as the equivalent of Sosai in Kyokushin. And the guy is maybe in his late 30s. Early. I mean, it boggles the mind of anyone who has even a fundamental sense of humility and loyalty. How can someone do that? It just blows my mind. I mean, it wouldn't matter if the guy was really good, and I don't know. I've never trained with him. It wouldn't matter if he was really good. The fact that he's got 10 stripes on his belt immediately, exactly. It's laughable. But if it wouldn't matter how good he was, the fact that he's got 10 stripes, you couldn't take it's like that movie. What was it? The movie with Mike Myers, where he said, whatever you do, don't look at his mole. And he gets introduced and he goes, mole. He couldn't take his eye off the mole. Well, it's like that with, someone's got a 10th dan and they're like 20 years younger than you and they've been training 30 years less than you. Exactly. They get their full first dan against 40 adults at 6 years old. That you can't take their black belt literally becomes like a mole. It actually becomes a drawback to them. But the problem is in some countries around the world, people don't know any better. The martial arts are still kind of funky and new, so they don't know any better. That's the way it is. 一つ我々は知性と体力と向上させことに望んで誤たざること。知性 wisdom と体力 physical strength とを向上させ we will look upwards to ことに望んで誤たざること。Putting other things aside, we will train for those qualities. Austin Powers, that's it. Thanks, Herman. I knew someone would have it. Mole. Don't look at his mole. Mole. It's like Freudian slip. It's hilarious. This guy with a 10th dan belt on, it doesn't matter the technique that literally he could show you a brilliant technique and you would go, yeah, but you could have shown me that as a 3rd dan and I would have respected you more, the whole idea, and it's not just 10th dan, it's 9th dan. I mean, these people around the world give themselves 9th dan. Mas Oyama was a 9th dan right up until fine. He would have been happy to die 9th dan. And when he went from Goju to Kyokushin, this is the attitude. There was one guy in Melbourne, failed his 2nd dan, got annoyed, left his instructor, started his own international organization, made himself a 5th dan. He'd never done anything in his life. Okay? So, I mean, it's just crazy. Where's the humility and all that? Okay. Chisei to tairyoku, wisdom and strength. We will look upwards to wisdom and strength, not seeking other desires. What that's saying is it doesn't say that the only thing in life is wisdom and strength. What it's saying is if you focus your training on the balance of wisdom and the balance of wisdom, mental development and physical training, and that wisdom and strength, she said tairyoku doesn't just mean physical buffness, it also means skills, technical skills. So it's the shingi tai all wrapped into one. We will look upwards to wisdom and strength, not seeking other desires. Okay? If you're able to do that, you get through life, a lot better. You think about all the crazy, harebrained, stupid, dumb things you've ever done in your life, and they're not connected to wisdom or strength or an equilibrated, centered, calm state of mind. They're usually the crazy things that you've done. I've had some experiences which maybe I don't mind talking about face to face with people, but I never put it on the internet because people take advantage of that and use it. But I've done some pretty crazy things in my life and I've ended up in places I shouldn't have been. And I just shake my head and wonder, wow, that was the stupidest thing I ever did. So wisdom and strength. What's wisdom? Well, it's not intelligence. It's not knowledge. You have data. Data gets input. And then you look at that data and classify it and quantify it, and that becomes knowledge. Okay? Then you take that knowledge and you apply it correctly, it becomes intelligence. And that intelligence then applied from the viewpoint of righteousness becomes wisdom. Okay. And so when Saul says we look upwards to wisdom and strength, that's a very lofty thing. Data, knowledge, intelligence, wisdom. There's a lot of people whose heads are crammed full of data and knowledge. They're crammed full of it. They could, you know, I remember once I was there with a monk, and I was listening to this monk, and this monk, I mean, it's almost, if you're even half receptive, the vibration from this monk would thrill you. You'd almost cry from the waves of love almost. And this guy's walked up and started to talk and started to tell the monk, recite all these scriptures and so on. And the monk was very patient, very, you know, wow, that's pretty cool. But you could see in the agitation of this person that it was all just a bunch of data revolving around in his head. There wasn't any transfer of wisdom. And it's the same with karate people. You walk into some dojos and the amount of data going on in this dojo is incredible. The range of techniques, the volume of techniques, the skill work that they're doing is really good. But to transfer that into wisdom, where that actually applies in your life as a warrior, is often not there. And that's what we need to do with Kyokushin, and that's what the new Genesis is. I love that phrase too, Clarence. The renaissance of Kyokushin, the new Genesis of Kyokushin, is taking all this body of knowledge and intelligence that we have and converting it into a wisdom which affects our lives. Grades have lost the purpose, progress now squandered, soul. Yeah, you know, if Shihan Kenny hadn't said that, I would. I just think it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Yeah, that's right. You know, and I see Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as a very, very, very profound fighting system. And now what they're doing is they're working hard to be recognized in their own mind, even as a martial art. Okay. And one of the good things about Jiu-Jitsu until probably around now is that there was a very, very high level universal standard. If you had a BJJ black belt, you were very efficient at the grappling. And I would actually say up to this point, if there was a BJJ black belt, if he could close in the range to range 4 and range 5, there weren't too many Kyokushin people in the world that he couldn't handle. But now it's changing because, like Mike says there, as it spread wide, it spread thin. Well, this is happening as BJJ grows. It's a fact of life that as you grow in Kyokushin, it was the same. You know, when I first trained at Hombu, I think the highest grade I ever saw was a 3rd dan. And if I recall, Oishi Shihan had come to Hombu and he was preparing at Hombu for his grading, his 3rd dan grading. So, I mean, there was, even the instructors were usually brown belts, and there were very few, if ever, black belts. Now it's like I said that time I went to a training camp with Solsai, there were 66, I think, more black belts in this camp in rows of 10, and the whole front row were 8th dans. And I go, wow, times have changed, you know. I was a 3rd dan, and I was the most junior in the whole group, so I was right up the back. Yeah, there you go. We want to have an 11th Q mindset. Exactly. You know. So, and then the last line I think is also very powerful. Shogai no shugyo, shogai, lifetime, shugyo, the training, the spiritual shugyo actually is more than just training. If you just want to do physical training, there's a different word in Japanese, but shugyo, karate no shugyo, shogai no shugyo means the lifetime of spiritual cultivation and training. Karate no michi ni tsuji, through the path of karate, Kyokushin no michi o mattou suru koto. We will fulfill the true meaning of the Kyokushin way. Well, you can, you know, if you're not Kyokushin, it's just like, I've actually seen the Kyokushin Dojo Kun plagiarized by a Kung Fu organization. And their last line was, all our lives through the discipline of Kung Fu, we will seek to cultivate the true meaning of the way. And I asked them where they got that from, and they said, well, I said, it's very similar to the Kyokushin training oath. The rest of it from start to finish was verbatim. They just changed 2 words in the last line. And I asked, that's very similar to Kyokushin, where they get it from. They said, they got back to me and said, well, all you got to do is look at the history of Wing Chun and the history of Kyokushin, and you'll see which one came first. And I wrote back and I said, well, I did do some research and I did find out that what came first, and that's actually the Kyokushin Dojo oath. They didn't write back to me, and it went offline for a couple of years, but I believe it's back up now. But anyway, the Kyokushin Dojo Kun was written by Sosai with Yoshikawa Eiji. And Yoshikawa Eiji wrote the famous book Musashi, the novel Musashi. And Yoshikawa Eiji was like the greatest novelist of his era. And his serialization of the Musashi book was the greatest thing in the 40s and 50s in Japan. So he added that very poetic flow. In Japanese, it flows very poetically. And it was his ability to write so beautifully that put Sosai's thoughts into such a beautiful way. So all our lives through the discipline of karate will seek to fulfill the true meaning of the Kyokushin way. All our lives, and this is really, really valuable because it's not something you do as a hobby like playing futsal with your school chums, or your work colleagues. It's actually something which it's a lifetime pursuit, and it's a lifetime of seeking. And to fulfill the true meaning of the Kyokushin way is a spiritual thing. It has to be, all right? Because if it's not, then it's a physical thing, and a physical thing means winning a tournament. And how many times have you won a tournament and walked away knowing that spiritually you haven't really changed? Physically, psychologically, to a degree, you develop some courage and hardness and attitude, but it still doesn't mean you're going to get to heaven any quicker. My dad used to say, everyone wants to go to heaven, but no one wants to die. He said, lots of people want the best things, but they're not willing to do the hard work to get there. Well, a lot of people don't know the difference between data, information, and wisdom, and immediately think they have wisdom. But I think for wisdom, you need to walk a long way on a certain trail. Well, there you go. There you go. Data. I add intelligence in there too. Data, information, intelligence, and wisdom, because at this stage in the world, as a secular world, we give a lot of credit to intelligence. We turn to people of intelligence for answers, but people of intelligence turn to people of wisdom for answers. So we have to take it that step further. Clarence, from an unrelated source or related, seek knowledge from the cradle to the grave. Well, there you go. The Quran's got some great stuff in it. Sometimes it's like the Bible. The worst interpretations of it are from different Christian religious groups, But anyway, this is why you combine the Dojo Kun with the 11 mottos, and you have a pretty profound, source of wisdom right there. I've just rewritten the whole book. I'm happy about that. Oh, and I just remembered too, I've got to get onto the, I'm looking for the 11 mottos here. I've got to get onto the graphic designer today, because today's the day where the logbook, we should be getting word back from the printer for the logbook. These are the 11 mottos. Zayu no me juichi kajo. Zayu no juichi kajo means the 11 mottos. Zayu literally means next to me. Zayu no me literally means the famous or the great, very special 11 mottos of Sosai. And I did my own translation from a book back in years ago when I wrote the book in 87. I rewrote my own translation because I couldn't find a translation I liked. The martial arts, the martial way begins and ends with courtesy. Therefore, be properly and genuinely courteous at all times. Following the martial way is like scaling a cliff. Continue upwards without rest. It demands absolute and unfaltering devotion to the task at hand. Strive to seize the initiative in all things, all the time guarding against actions stemming from selfish animosity or thoughtlessness. I put a lot of thought into that one because there's a very famous saying in karate, karate ni sente nashi, which is usually translated as there is no initial attack in karate. But Sosai said, in this saying, it says, karate ni sente ari, shikashi shito nashi. He said, no, there is sente, but there is no selfishness. So he separated, first of all, the word sente literally means first hand. In Japanese, it's when people translate into English, they see sente and they read the te part of karate and they think it means the initial attack, but it also means taking the initiative. And Sosai said, no, there is initiative, taking the initiative. So he said, strive to seize the initiative in all things, but guard against selfish desires or thoughtlessness. And that's very important. Was given a beautiful copy of the Dojo Kun back in 2014. All the senpai signed it for him. And that's fantastic. That's so cool, Gaz. Yeah, I often give out the Dojo Kun to people too as a gift. I've got it on an A3 paper with the English and Japanese and so on. That's fantastic. So even for the martial artist, the place of money cannot be ignored, yet one should be careful never to become attached to it. That's important. Someone recently sent me a bunch of blogs and newspaper reports and everything about a well-known Japanese Kyokushin guy who tried to defraud $100 million and got hit up by the taxation department for $30 million. And I believe he's still paying it off. And he gets it paid off by charging his students a fortune in gradings. But anyway, the martial arts, the martial way is centered in posture. Strive to maintain correct posture at all times. That's very profound, not just because, I'll tell you what, one thing that a lot of people don't realize, good posture, that's why I always, when I do these, despite the fact that my feet are asleep now and I'm not going to be able to walk for a couple of minutes afterwards, I always try to sit in Seiza because Seiza gives you a straight spine, and a straight spine gives you clarity of thought because the energy up and down the spine is not interrupted by pinches of the nerves and so on. And in India, that's why they always say that you should meditate with a straight spine because the energy flow is very different. So as far as possible, don't slouch. And that's one of the main reasons, because the energy flow is vitally different. So Sosai says it begins and ends in posture. Strive to maintain correct posture. The martial way begins with 1,000 days and is mastered after 10,000 days. So 10,000 days is about 30 years. Okay, and I remember when I first read that, like when I wrote this book in 87, I'd been training for maybe 16 years. So I was miles up. Now I look at 10,000 days and I think, dang, I still don't get the picture. Anyway, in the martial arts, introspection begets wisdom. Introspection, the scalpel of introspection, as Yogananda calls it, is the key to everything. Always see contemplation on your actions as an opportunity to improve. That's not just Shingi Tai. That's all of them. Your physical training. How do you keep a record of it? Your technical training and also your mental training. How did you react today? That little old lady cutting you off in the white car get you goat, get you angry. Well, if you get angry over things like that, you still got some work. I get angry sometimes too. The nature and purpose of the martial way is universal. All selfish desires should be roasted in the tempering fires of hard training. The martial arts begins with a point and ends in a circle. Straight lines stem from this principle. The true essence of the martial way can only be realized through experience. Knowing this, learn never to fear its demands. A lot of people fear experience and they hope just by living a certain number of years, they gain experience. It doesn't work like that. Okay? And I'll read the last one. Always remember in the martial arts, the rewards of a confident and grateful heart are truly abundant. That's very profound too, because what goes around comes around. That's karma. Okay. My Jake, beautiful. Mike Clark. A healthy body means a healthy mind. Isn't that what Grandma used to say? I mean, boy, oh boy, some of that old house wisdom, is fantastic. So that's the Dojo Kun, a bit of a look at the Dojo Kun there. And I hope that, it's clear that my whole perception of the Dojo Kun is a spiritual thing. It's all about finding that, not just finding inner peace, which is the ultimate goal, I guess, but also finding the mental control that allows us to maintain control of the inevitable, the emotional reactions to the inevitable ups and downs of life. You know, that's life. Life is ups and downs. But like Mike said, you know, it's what we become as a result of them. That is the question in hand, you know. Now commercialized karate, sole purpose is profit. Now we show karate. Yeah, it's true. But yeah, it's not just karate. It's like, look at some of those religions. Remember that Tammy Backer and that guy, you know, and God just sent me a message to say you need to send 50% of your bank savings tomorrow. You know, people who had this blind faith were just sending money to the point where they'd go into poverty, and these proselytizers and well, not proselytizers, these you know, radio ministries were just making a fortune. Bisman, good to see you, man, from Tambourine. Nice. Get in touch sometime. Come and do some training. Nice to see you. Human nature, regardless of what we wrap it up in. Yeah, look, human nature is, we're essentially driven by self-preservation, procreation of the species. We want to find our space in the hierarchy of dominance, you know, and every family, siblings, families, extended families, communities, dojos, states, countries, they all have hierarchies of dominance, and it takes great humility to find your true place in the right hierarchy of dominance without being violent, without being arrogant, and so on. So I think those 11 mottos, and especially the Dojo Kun, which we say every day, if you can say it in English, then work to being able to say it in Japanese. And if you can say it in Japanese, then work to understand what it means in Japanese, because do some research, break it down. I'm actually going to send I'm going to make a note of that now and send out that to my Patreons. So if you're not on Patreon, get on. Okay, and make sure you like, hit the bell, leave a message, subscribe, all those wonderful things which we always talk about, and I always forget to mention it. But please, it does make a difference. So get along and leave a comment, and also tell me. I'm really interested to hear more about, not just in the live chat, because the live chat just is limited, but leave a message later and give your opinion as to what your Dojo Kun means to you, what it means to you, and what you take away with it, and if you're able to live it in your life. So thanks again, Gad. It's so nice, and everyone is so nice that you actually hang in here. I hope you enjoyed that. Bisman, I haven't. Please, Bisman, let me meet you sometime if you're up here in Tambourine. That's great. Kyle, I got to get back to you too. I need some information again. Kyle Buttress there, high rank, training in karate for many years. Who's also been looking after my internet, but times have changed, and I've got to talk to him about it. Arigato gozaimashita. Thanks, Kyle. Really appreciate you being here. Mike, thanks for coming. Daniel, good on you, Daniel. Thanks for everything. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Harry. And we'll see you on Wednesday. I'm getting courageous again, so I might go back down into the dojo with everything and see if I can't get some technique training done again. Thank you, Us. Thanks, Dallas, all the way from Dallas. I spent a bit of time in Dallas. Us, see you soon. Us, Bisman, you have to tell me who you are. I don't know you. I'd like to meet you sometime. Paul, good, dankeschön, mein Freund. Sensei Claudio, Us, Torbjörn, thank you. All those Patreon family, there's so many of you here, and I love it, and I appreciate it. I'll get on to you because I've got to deal with this change in Patreon rules now, which is charging VAT, or whatever it is. So I'm finding alternates at the moment, and I'll be on to you. Thanks, Rochelle. Always appreciate your ever-present attendance. Thank you, everyone. Us. See ya.